Hi there, in this video we're going to be working on an old Guild SB201 base. So we're going to be stripping off all the old finish from it, and later on in the video we're going to be giving it a nice new oil finish. We're also going to be making a new pickguard for it and a couple of little upgrades as well. So let's have a look at the project now. So here's today's project. This is a Guild SB201, and as you can tell it's not in very good condition. So today we're going to be stripping the finish off this base, and then we're going to see what we've got underneath, and then that's going to dictate what we do moving forward. You can see all the neck finish isn't very good either, big chips there, and the nut seated very badly, big gap under there. We're going to try and keep the finish on the face of the headstock due to the inlays, because these will be stenciled out, so we don't want to mess with that too much. But we're also going to change the pickguard as well, because this one is one of the nastiest looking pieces of material I've ever seen. It's like it belongs in the toilet or something, and there's a big crack in it as well. So look forward to changing that and getting rid of it. On the back it's also got some damage as well. Someone's had a go at patching in something there, and then there's lots more chips and cracks. So I'm going to get this all stripped off, but before that we'll take all the parts off, and then we can start. So it looks like it's got the original pots, and you can see the branded Guild and some code numbers on here as well, which I'm not sure what they mean, but someone out there probably does, and they could probably date these based on that. So I believe I'm right in saying these pickups are called a B90 because they're like a base version of a P90 pickup, and they do actually sound really good. I've had a couple of Guilds here before and they've had the same pickup. It has a really nice sound to them. There's a quick tip for removing these bushings. I've got a old bolt here, stainless steel one. I'm just going to drop that down, head down, and I'm going to put our tailpiece bushing back in, stud back in there, and screw that up. That's hitting that now. So we need a screwdriver to tighten this up, and that will lever this out, push it up. I've actually got a video showing the process in a bit better detail if you'd like to check that out. So I've just knocked the nut out, and you can see why it was sitting so badly. Someone shimmed it up at some point with a piece of paper, and I think it's got a QR code on this here, so obviously it wasn't that long ago. So it's going to need a new nut when we come to put it back together. So I've got all the parts off now, so we're going to strip the finish next, and this is actually going to be easier than I thought it might be. Because this is nitrocellulose lacquer, which means it will strip very easily with acetone. So we're going to get started on that now. Just got some acetone down here, and then I've got some of these Scotch-Brite type things, which I'll soak with the acetone, then scrub with it. And I've got quite a few of these, so as they get clogged up with paint, I'll be able to swap them over. And then I'm just going to have to be careful not to get any on the headstock here. But it should be fairly fast, and it looks like we've got some nice wood underneath. I can tell by the colour of the mahogany here. It's going to be nice. This looks like Honduran mahogany to me, which would make sense considering it's an American made instrument, and from the period it was when mahogany wasn't as hard to come by as it is now. I should be wearing gloves really. I'm about to put them on in a minute and just get started first. So we've got very lucky with this one because this is definitely Honduran mahogany, and this is one piece, or at least the top is. I may discover there's a top on it as I keep going down, but this top is all one piece of Honduran mahogany. It's going to look really good with a natural finish, so hopefully that's the way the customer will go. As I said, we're going to base how we finish it on what we found underneath the paint, and I think he'll go for a natural finish now. So moving on to the back now, and we've already got a head start because all of the runoff from the front has soaked into the back and started removing the paint already. And I've just been scrubbing at it a bit there to just get rid of it completely, but obviously you can tell partly done already. So the whole thing will need sanding afterwards. I'm probably going to sand at just 180, and then also have to sort out the dents, which are quite numerous on the sides, so I'll have to remove those as well, probably scrape those out. But now it's just a case of carrying on doing what we're doing on the front. And you'll notice I've changed the card underneath just to stop it sitting in all the old paint. So the front will probably still need a bit of a clean up afterwards because this stuff will continue to run down, but it won't be as bad as it would be if I just put it in all that. So I like to basically just keep going until I'm sure the majority of it is removed, and then I can wipe the excess off the surface with some paper towel. So I've now done the neck also, and I've just got to the headstock, and I'm doing the edges and the back of the headstock a bit differently because I don't want any overflow of the acetone to go on the face of the headstock, which we're keeping intact. So I've been using a much drier rag with acetone on, and then just kind of soaking it in one spot and then letting that soak in, and then kind of scraping at it a bit with a scraper, and also using the scraper dry as well on any areas I don't want to whisk. So that's come out nicely on that edge. I'm going to do the same on the back because we don't want any flowing down the tuner holes, and we're also going to do the other edge and the top like that as well. So it's now all completely stripped, and as I hoped, it is a single piece of Honduran mahogany. It's not a top, and there's no other pieces glued in or anything. There's nothing ugly other than this damage, which was obviously through the finish. We were aware of that before we started. So we're going to have to sand these out. We're going to have to go fairly aggressive on these ones. But the flat surfaces aren't bad at all. There's hardly any marks on here. I think there's a couple just over there. And that's basically it on the top, so we don't have to sand too aggressively at all on this. I'm probably going to hit this with 180 first, and around the edges we're going to have to be a bit more kind of coarse, and some scraping as well. Now we're going to have to be careful to keep this edge profile as well, so we don't want to change that. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to sand this whole base. So there's not much point in me showing the whole sanding process because it's going to get pretty boring, but I'll just show you how I'm dealing with them. I've just started on this one now. I'm using 120 on this, 120 grit. If that takes too long, I could go down to 80. But I've got a little rubber block here with some 120 on it. And because this is a flat surface here, I'm using the rubber block. But up here on this area, on the profile, I'm going to have to use my fingers. So I'll deal with this section first. And I need to extend beyond it as well, because not only will that sand out some of these smaller marks, but it's not going to create a flat surface here, because if I just stuck on this surface like this, you could actually change the outline of the base ever so slightly, and it probably wouldn't be enough that you would notice. Something just may look not as good as it did. So it's not going to actually look like you can see the flat, it just might look like a wavy line rather than a nice flowing line. So I need to kind of blend it all in. So hopefully you can see that shrank quite a bit. I've also managed to get this one nearly gone, and this one down here is shrinking as well. So it won't take too much longer of that to get rid of this. And this is probably the worst one on this side, it's the deepest. So that dent's pretty much gone now. So we're going to move on to some of the others. That was a bad dent because it had sort of crushed fibres in it. It had actually been cut at the same time. So it cut all the wood fibres and they'd kind of stuck in the dent, which is why we chose to sand it out. Others like this one just over here, which is just more like a dent. It's difficult to see on camera, but you should be able to see just a white patch there. And that's just like a dent in the surface with no kind of cut fibres at all. So ones like this should be able to be steamed out. So I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But in the meantime, I'm going to carry on working my way around the edge, sanding all these. And then we'll come back to that steaming in a minute. So we've now sanded the whole edge with 120, and we can go through the grades on that and also sand the top and the back now as well. Before we do that, I'm going to try and steam out this little dent here. And I've got my soldering iron heated up, and here's a little bit of paper towel just soaked in water, and hopefully this should lift that out. So what actually happens is it raises the grain which has been trapped down in there, in that little spot there. Sometimes it takes a few goes, but it usually does work. Some woods respond better to it than others. Mahogany is pretty good. Alder is also very good. And some woods are a little bit more difficult. So now you can see that's mostly gone now. There's a little bit of it there you can still see, but a quick sanding and that will disappear. So it's much improved it, but not completely removed it. Sometimes you can completely get rid of them, but this is more of like a white line rather than an actual divot now. So that'll sand out really quite easily compared. This one on the bottom horn is much bigger, so it probably again won't take it completely away, but we'll see what we can do. So you can see after another going over with the steam and the soldering iron, it's pretty much gone completely. You can just feel it, but it's half the size it was, so it'll sand out again really easily now. So I'm going to look through the base now and see if there's any more of those, and then we'll finish off with the sanding. So the whole body and neck have now been sanded to 220 grit. I'm actually going to go a bit higher than that, but before I do that, I'm going to sort out this headstock lacquer. You can see there's quite a bit of damage around the edges and missing lacquer at the bottom here. It looks like it's a fiberboard veneer on here, so it's a black veneer already, no black paint, which is good. And you can see around the edges have got quite bumped. So we're going to sort that out now. And this is going to be quite an involved process. So I've actually done a separate video on this. So you're welcome to go and check that out. I'll put a link up to it. And I'm going to get this headstock sorted now. So this is the bridge we're going to be using. This is the Hipshot Supertone bridge. And I've put these bushings in just now as well. I'm going to have to remove them in a minute, but I want to do a test assembly of this bridge to make sure it fits. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite. The spacing is just a little bit off. It's extremely close, but not quite enough to be able to allow these bolts to pass through and fit into the bushings below. So rather than fill and re-drill these, I'm actually going to widen the holes on the bridge. I've already done this one here. I've enlarged that ever so slightly, and that should be enough. I'm going to do the same to the other side now. So basically just enlarging this hole should give me enough clearance to be able to install this bridge correctly. Now we're going to see if it fits. Yeah, it does. And that looks great, and I'll never know. So before buying this bridge, I obviously checked that the action was going to be good, and it was the right height, which we can see if we rest this long straight edge down the frets here. And that's actually pretty much resting on the saddle there, with the saddle set to its lowest position. I'll get a shot of that now. So there's the saddle just there. I don't know if you can make that out, little black piece. And this straight edge is sitting the tiniest bit just above that, which is really good. It means we're never going to bottom out these saddles. We're always going to have enough room to be able to adjust down the action. And there's plenty of room to go up as well. So other than that little bit of drilling, it's the perfect bridge for the space. So here's the base's new nut, which I've just made. You'll remember the old one was actually shimmed up with pieces of card underneath it because it was too short, so we had to make a new one, and here it is. I'm just in the process of polishing these frets up at the moment. I've actually just levelled them using my fret bar here because there was a little bit of buzz I noticed when it had strings on around this area. I've levelled all of them, the whole neck, but especially around here there was a few little high spots which I noticed, and when I came to level the frets just then it was obvious where they were. Fortunately they weren't too severe because the frets are very low on this base, so I didn't want to use up too much material and end up having to need to refret this base, but no, it was all good. So I'm just polishing them up now, and then it's going to make all the difference when we get the strings back on, because it's going to play really nice and cleanly. So these are looking much better now. I think someone had had a go at levelling them before and not done a very good job of recrowning them, so they didn't really have much shape to them, but they got a much better crown on top now. And nice and shiny, of course. I've also cleaned up the fretboard. This still needs to be oiled. It'll go a bit darker then, but this is cleaned up nicely as well. So I'm going to go and finish off the sanding now, and then it'll be time to make the pickguard. We're on to making our pickguard now. So I've already made up a template for this from the original. You can see I've glued in a few pieces of veneer around the edge of the picket right here, and that's because the original, which was copied onto this template, was a little bit too loose. So I wanted to make it a bit tighter so we don't have any nasty gaps around the edge, and this is a nice tight fit now. And this template material is 1/2 inch plywood. It might not seem like it makes a lot of sense making a template up for just a one-off like this, but I find that really gives me the best results because I can do any kinds of test fitting I need to do rather than risking the actual material, which is quite expensive these days. And also it allows me to use the bevel cutter on the router to get a nice neat bevel around the edge. So this is our material here. This is 3-ply black, and this is the back side, which is where we're going to stick the template to, and then we're going to cut it out on the scroll saw and then route it to the line. So we've now cut the outline with a flush cutting bit, and we're next going to move on to this bit here, which is the bevel cutter. So this will cut our angle around the edge to give it a nice kind of factory look. So the pickguard's all finished off now. I've just been cleaning up the edges, as you saw with the scraper here. I was also sanding it after that with some 400 grit, and then following up with quadruple O steel wool. So the edges should all look nice now. Just got to remove this plastic protective film, and hopefully underneath there won't be anything we don't want to see, like deep scratches or anything. They come with 2 layers of protective tape on, which is normally enough to stop it, but I have had it before where there's actually already scratches underneath there, and then they need all polishing out, which takes ages. But this is looking brand new, which is great. Yeah, that looks good. So I can put the copper foil on the back of this now, and then mount the controls into it. So I've just been going over the base and doing the fine sanding, and remember there's an extra job that we have to do, which is filling this hole in down here. The base originally had a strap button like this, which is like an acoustic end pin really, and that just goes in there with a friction fit. But the owner would prefer a more normal strap button down here, so we're going to go for Dunlop strap locks on this, which means we need to fill this hole. So I've just made up this little dowel here, because it's got a few nicks in it and stuff. That's why I've been pulling it in and out with the pincers. But it's going to go like that basically. It's going to be going a bit more than that. It's going to get tapped in with glue as well. But I've checked to make sure this is going all the way to the bottom of the hole, and it is, and it's making contact all the way along, so it should be nice and strong. There's the two next to each other. So we're going to tap that in now. The base is now fully sanded and ready for the oil finish, so that's what we're going to do now. I'm just going to be roughly applying this. I'm not bothered about dust or anything like that, because all of this finish is actually going to be wiped off. What doesn't soak into the wood anyway. There's going to be nothing left on the surface. So I've just got an old brush here, and I'm just going to brush it on, and that'll probably get absorbed pretty soon. You can see it's really wet at the moment, it's almost flooded, but that'll get absorbed into there, and then when we come back to the area in a minute, it'll be dry. Or at least not as wet as it is anyway. So I'm just going to go over the whole base like this, brushing it on and seeing that lovely colour change. And that's how the first couple of coats are going to be applied. And then after that, I'll be wet sanding with the oil. But these first two are just allowed to soak in. And you'll notice we haven't applied any grain filler to this, and that's because that's just how I like my oil finishes. I like them to still feel nice and natural and woody. So I'm just going to let this soak in on the top now for probably 5 minutes, and then come back to it, and then I'll be able to wipe off any excess or apply more if needed, and then we can turn it over as well after I've wiped it off. We don't need to wait for it to be completely dry before turning it over, because as I've mentioned, it doesn't matter about getting any kind of bits of dust or anything in this, because it's all going to be wiped away. It's a very easy finish to apply at this stage, but it's quite labour intensive because we're going to be doing lots of wet sanding with the oil and applying probably up to 6 or 7 coats. So here's what it looks like after the oil has just been put on, and I'm going to do this kind of same camera angle in about 15 minutes to show you what the difference is and how much the wood has absorbed the oil. So 10 minutes later, and it looks like this. You can see a lot more of the wood now. It's no longer flooded on the surface, and some areas have absorbed more than others, which is fine. Those areas will cover with more coats. So we're going to wipe this off now and then do the back. So on the back we've got some runoff from the front, which doesn't matter at all. It'll all blend in. So we're just going to do the same process now on the back. Just pushing it on and leaving it. So for the headstock, we're bound to get some oil on the lacquer on the front, and this doesn't matter because, as I mentioned, that's all going to be wet sanded later on. So when we wet sand, it will remove any of the oil off the face of the headstock. Also doesn't matter if I get any over on the fretboard, because that's going to be oiled anyway. In fact, I've already given it one coat when I was oiling the front. So that's actually going to do it good, if anything. Just you got to make sure to wipe it off while it's still wet, because if it dries on there, you'll get shiny spots. And if I was going to leave this to, if I was going to build up the coats like this and then just leave it rather than wiping it all off, what you'd end up with would be quite a glossy finish, but it would also feel kind of tacky. It would have a sticky feel to it. It would build up well enough, but it just doesn't feel very nice to play. Whereas if you wipe it all off like this, you get a nice woody feel, and it feels like you're just playing on a natural piece of wood, but it's got the protection of the oil. So it's the next day now, and this oil's had overnight to dry. We're now going to wet sand with the oil using 1200 grit paper. You will remember the body was already sanded to 1000 grit, so we're progressing through the grits, except now we're wet sanding with the oil rather than just dry sanding. Ordinarily I may do 2 or 3 coats like the first one we did where we let it soak in, but this wood seems to be taking on the oil really well, and I don't think it's needed, so we can skip one of those coats and go straight to the wet sanding. So again, we're just brushing on at first, and then we're going to leave this on the surface, and then we're going to wet sand with the oil which is on the surface. So we're just really spreading it about for now, making sure everywhere's got a good coating. Okay, so that's the top coated now, so we can start sanding with the oil. I've just got a small piece of the 1200 here and a little rubber block, and it's going to just go like that. So the rubber block keeps everything nice and flat, rather than using your fingers where you can create divots and troughs into the wood. And you don't have to really sand too much at all, it's just a quick going over with the paper, because we're going to still be going through the rest of the grades as well, and with very few scratches actually on this wood as well. So we're not sanding out big deep scratches or anything, we're just giving it really a polish with this. So we've now sanded all over the top of the body, and we're just going to leave what's left on there of the oil for, again, about 10 to 15 minutes for that to soak in a bit more, and then we'll wipe it off. And here's how the finish has come out after all those coats. This has now been sanded up to 2500 and had plenty of coats of oil. So you can see it's come out really nicely. There's like a kind of soft sheen coming off it. It feels really good too, still feels like natural wood rather than feeling like plastic. So I'm really happy with how this has come out. I'm going to show you the back now, and then we'll move on to assembling the space. As just mentioned, one of the great things about an oil finish is it just feels so nice. There's no drag at all on that, it's not sticky, and it still feels nice and natural as well. It's super smooth to the touch. And obviously we've kept the grain open on this so you can see in the light, you still see inside the grain here, which is again how I like to do an oil finish. I don't see the point in filling the grain if you're going to do an oil finish. The whole point is it's supposed to stay feeling natural and woody. If you fill the grain, it doesn't really feel like that anymore. So it's been a couple of weeks now since we were last working on this project, and I've begun to assemble it. You can see I've got the headstock now sorted. It's nice and glossy and there's no damage remaining on it. So I'm very happy with how that's come out. It looks like a completely different headstock than it did at the beginning of the video. So now we're going to move on to assembling the rest of the base, and the next job up will be shielding the cavities with copper foil. For doing the copper foil process, I like to use these big sheets. So this is an A4 sheet of copper foil, rather than the narrow stuff you can get. You can get narrow stuff on rolls as well. But I like to use the big sheets and then just cut the pieces I need from the sheets. And I always start off with the side pieces here, so the kind of walls of the cavity. So I'll cut a narrow strip, the same height as this, a little bit extra so it overlaps on the bottom, and the same for the pickup here. And then I'll do all the edges first, all around here, and then I'll finish off with a nice neat piece which touches all the edges and makes everything kind of look as one. So I'll cut that in one piece off that big sheet, and same for this one here. If you'd like to see this process in a bit more detail, feel free to check out one of my other videos, which is actually on a guitar, but the process is exactly the same. So if you'd like to see that in more detail, check out that video. I've now put in the edge pieces, so I've got the bottom of this to go and the bottom of this piece. To do these pieces, I like to lay this on top and then keep it there, kind of rub down. That gives me a nice accurate line to work to. So hopefully you can see the line of the cavity is being transferred through the copper foil. So now it's just a case of cutting out the outline which is left there, and I'll allow a little bit extra around there so I can fold it up against the edge a bit more, just to make sure everything is all as one piece. There's that little bit of extra I was talking about. You can see the line there, and then I've got probably 5mm, something like that, extra around the edge. That's the copper foil complete now. You'll notice I've got a couple of little tabs going over the edge here, and that's to link up with the copper foil on the back of the pickguard, so it all acts as one big shield. I've gone right over the top of this shielding block here. You can see I've left the holes there. You can see where the pickup's going to mount, so that's not going to be any problem, just to poke the screws through there. And now I'm going to mount the bridge, and you can see I've got my ground wire poked through the little hole already. You obviously don't want to forget to do that and put the bushings in first, because then you've got to take them all back out again. So I've got that in there waiting, and I'm going to press these bushings in using my pillar drill or drill press. You may have noticed I had a tiny bit of Type Bond wood glue on these as they went in, and that's going to make them just a little bit more secure because it fills the little voids around them, but it's not really going to stick to the metal very well, so it's not going to make them hard to remove if they ever need to come out. So it's just like a bit of added security, because I've read about this particular bridge that these can come loose because there's a lot of force going through those studs. So I've just installed the pickup. I replaced both of the mounting bolts which go into that block of brass underneath because they were kind of not matching. One was kind of brass coloured and the other looks like it used to be gold plated. So I've replaced those because all those little details matter in the end. Same goes for the truss rod cover. That's got some weird not matching ones as well, so I'm going to be replacing those as well. So all those little bits make a difference. But we're going to do the soldering now. So I've just got to wire in the pickup and obviously the ground wire, and that'll be that done. And then we'll put the strings on. I've just loosely placed the pickguard on. I've not done any of the screws up yet, and at this point I'm just going to check all our electrics are working. We checked it at the beginning, but we just can't be too sure, so it's always worth double checking, because otherwise you've got to take all these pickguard screws out again. So we're just going to tap on the pickup, and that's working. Volume down, no sound like you'd expect. So that's good, and should be able to just hear with the hiss of the amp if the tone's working. And it's still making sound. Yeah, and you can hear that. So now I can put the screws back in and get this base set up. So I'm just doing the final job now, which is fitting the truss rod cover back on. Everything else is done. I've given it a full setup, and we've got about 2mm action and no buzz at all, so that plays really nicely. So we're gonna see if we can make a nice sound out of it now. That's all for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please don't forget to leave me a like, because they really help me out. And also subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. If you have any questions on the process in this video, feel free to leave a comment and I'll be glad to get back to you. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.